just to kick us off, so we can get to know you a little bit more, can you give us like a very quick snapshot of, I guess, your church involvement maybe in New Zealand, which obviously led then to Bible college, and your life and leadership journey since?
Yeah, so my church involvement in New Zealand. So I was brought up in a non-Christian home. So my parents divorced, I think, around about when I was about 15 or 16. But around that time is when I went along to a church camp, and I was going out with a girl then, and so she brought me along to this camp, and I ended up basically moving away from her and finding Jesus. And so that was back in 1993, and I've been walking with him ever since. So I was just involved in a very small church back in New Zealand, I think about maybe 150 people, something like that. And I was at that church until I basically left New Zealand, which was, like John said, I was went to university. I'm from a university town in New Zealand called Dunedin, which is a small place in the south of the South Island. And yeah, and I became a school teacher for a couple of years, and then in 2002 we came over for Bible college in Australia, here in Sydney.
And then, what was your experience with Bible college, and what led you, I guess, to stay? You've obviously never left, you're still there now. So what happened, in those few years, and how's it gone since?
Yeah, so I mean, I came over for worship and creative arts. So I was a worship leader back in my church, and like it's when you're in a small church, like I felt like I was probably a little bit like a little fish or a big fish in a little pond. But when I came over to Hillsong Church, it was kind of like the opposite. I was barely plankton in the Atlantic Ocean, it felt like. So came over, and I found that pastoral leadership was kind of, I think, where God was leading me. I felt that there was opportunities that were opening in that area, and I guess it was from that time in that season that I really felt God open up what my true callings and giftings and passions and dreams and stuff which is to pastor and to be involved in pastoral ministry. So that's kind of been the journey. And I did 2 years of Bible college, and then the following year I had an opportunity to intern with Pastor Brian Houston, which was a great experience for me. I was the last intern that he ever had. I think the thought for him was, man, after Jay Jury, I'm never doing that again. So I pretty much ruined it for everybody else coming after me. And 2000, and so looked after the men's ministry. So 04, 05, 06. And then at the very end of 2007, they asked me to go out to what's called our St. Mary's Extension Service. It was back then, and it was it was a little church of about I think my first weekend we had about 151 people or 170 people or something like that. And so now it's become a fully fledged campus, and I've been there ever since. So yeah, about 10 or 11 years in this role now, John.
And you were telling me the other day that you've gone from 170 or whatever on your first weekend to about 1,100 on a typical Sunday now.
Yeah, average. That's average attendance. So I don't know if you guys count church attendance in the UK like we do here, but for me, my philosophy is 1, 2, miss a few, 99, 100. So we're very generous counters here. No, so yeah, John, we've grown it a lot since those early days, and we're sitting at around about 11, 1,200, and then we've got about another 150 or so youth that meet on a Friday night, and about 150 or so women that meet on a Thursday morning. So those are those are our that's what our weekend sort of our attendance looks like across the week.
Wow, that's brilliant, mate. So maybe we can discuss after you've spoken. We do a little bit of a Q&A if we've got time. So we can maybe discuss, specifics about, how did you grow the church, that, by that much, etc. So what I want to do though is obviously, you're here to speak to us. So I just want to pass the platform over to you, mate. I'll put myself on mute. And then what we'll do is after you've spoken, if we want to discuss anything, about what you've said, we can do that. And then we can just open it up for a Q&A at the end before you leave. Is that all right, mate?
No.
So over to you, bro.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Well, guys, thank you so much for having me this morning. It's an incredible honor and a privilege. And I know that kind of sounds maybe a little bit trite when speakers will come on and say that, but it genuinely is a privilege to be here with you all. And so thank you, John, for the invite. Thank you, Pastor Richard, for having me as well, mate. It's not something that I take lightly. And, I really hope and pray that this is something this morning that is going to help you guys. It's going to speak to you, and it's going to hopefully be really relevant to your everyday at the moment. So it's been crazy times that we're living in. Like John said, I met him all the way back in 2002, and I was a school teacher, and this guy, I think he was a personal trainer or something like that. And I'll never forget that because, speaking to Suzanne, John's wife, her salvation story was something that I think many of you guys would already know it. It's something that I think is pretty amazing. And I'll never forget to her when I asked her about how she met Jesus, and she said, I didn't really believe in God until I saw John with his shirt off. So John, mate, I don't know how you managed it, but
still got it, mate. Still got it.
So hopefully you've still got that body, mate, rocking. So anyway, guys, I thought I'd bless you with that little bit of information. You might not have known Suzanne's salvation story, but there you go, you do now. So the title of what I'm wanting to speak about this morning is called Foxes, Vines, Grapes, and the Normalization of Deviance. So Foxes, Vines, Grapes, and the Normalization of Deviance. Song of Songs 2 verse 15, and many of you will know the scripture. It says this: catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. I think all of us, when it comes to our businesses, our relationships, our finances, our God-given callings as men, all of us want to see and are believing for healthy vines that will bear fruit. But here's the thing, a fruitful anything, whether it be a fruitful marriage or relationships or businesses or even a fruitful life, it won't just fall into our lap. And there are so many little foxes running around. And if we're not careful and if we don't catch them, they will spoil the vine. And of course, we know that no vine equals no fruit. So foxes, vines, and grapes, I think we can understand that. But what about the normalization of deviance? Well, that's a great question. And I'm glad that you're all asking it. So late in 2016, I was asked to do a wedding in a Pacific island. It's called Rarotonga, and it's kind of just off the coast of New Zealand. It's not that far. And while I was there, I went and watched a great movie. It was called Deepwater Horizon with Mark Wahlberg, and it was all about the events leading up to and the havoc created by the big BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. I'm not sure if you guys can remember it, but it was literally the largest oil spill that the world had ever seen. It was absolutely catastrophic what it had done. And so I really enjoyed the movie. But the story intrigued me. They always make out, one party to be the bad guy and, one party to be the good guy. And so I wanted to find out, a little bit more about it. And, because what actually happens can be quite different. So I jumped on Google, as I'm sure all of us have, and I caused the I searched for the main cause of the oil spill, and that's where I discovered the term, the normalization of deviance. And again, I'd never heard that phrase before. I'm sure all of you have heard that phrase before. I mean, John uses that phrase in his everyday language because he's above, you know, everybody else when it comes to his articulation and speaking like that. But I found out that that the normalization of deviance, it was first used in relation to another international disaster in 1986. And some of you might remember where you were when the Space Shuttle Challenger launch happened. You know, it was a spaceship that exploded shortly after liftoff. I think it was in January 1986. And the cause of the disaster was determined to be the failure of the O-ring gaskets, which is on one of the rocket boosters. And it was in her book, the Challenger launch decision, where sociologist Dr. Diane Vaughan basically examined why NASA allowed the launch to occur when they had overwhelming information that a disaster was exactly what was going to happen. And the reason she discovered, she called the normalization of deviance. And here's what the definition is. So the normalization of deviance is defined as the gradual process through which unacceptable practice or standards become acceptable. As the deviant behavior is repeated without catastrophic results, it becomes the social norm for the organization. So let me just say that one more time for you. The normalization of deviance is defined as the gradual process through which unacceptable practice or standards become acceptable. As the deviant behavior is repeated without catastrophic results, it becomes the social norm for the organization. Now, guys, it sounds like a really complicated and maybe irrelevant term, but just bear with me because I'm sure most of us here have ended up in some sort of accident or predicament exactly because of this principle. So let me try and use a very simple illustration for you. So, you know, we all have a car, or most of you blokes would have a car, and in that car we have many things: a steering wheel, there's an engine, there is a dashboard, and on that dashboard is what we call over here in Australia the fuel gauge. And is that what you call it over there in England, guys? The fuel gauge. And really what it is, it's not a suggestion, the fuel gauge. It's an accurate measure of how much or how little fuel you have in your car. And as soon as that fuel light turns on and you fill up with fuel, guess what? You will never run out of petrol. You'll never run out of gas. When that fuel light comes on and you go to the petrol station and fill up, you will never run out of fuel. But if you're anything like me, the fuel gauge becomes the opposition that needs to be beaten. I mean, how important is accuracy really when it comes to at the cost of convenience? And you know who said that? No half-decent accountant ever. And that's when deviation begins. The shortcut to convenience gradually becomes the norm, and frequently we just get lucky with how far we can go, with how far the car's got, how many miles it has to go. And but one day, as it would happen, luck runs out. And you know, I don't know how hot it gets over there in Southport. What's a hot day over there in Southport? John, 35 degrees. Does it get up to that?
Probably not, very rarely, maybe 30 perhaps.
Okay, all right, okay, that's still warm. So it's 30 degrees, you're on the A570 in rush hour traffic. The last petrol station that you went past was a few miles back. You've got a crucial pastoral appointment in 15 minutes with some ruthless, brutal men's ministry oversight from your church, who incidentally has the patience of a British wolf, which we all know we haven't seen a wolf in England since the 1760s. But wait, you're a member of the AA, And so it's all good until you take your AA. Do you guys have the AA over there? Just give me a nod. You do. And you take your AA card out. You realize it expired 3 years ago. How could that happen? Because of the normalization of deviance, again, regarding your membership renewal reminders. And so you're stuck, you're abandoned, you're late, you're now way off track, and you're wondering how that fuel gauge could ever have been so cruel. But guess what? It wasn't the fuel gauge's fault. It was ours. And instead of playing games with that fuel gauge, we should have just stopped earlier and filled up. Because just like Song of Songs tells us, to catch those little foxes instead of letting them run free. In other words, I should have arrested that behavior. I should have not given in to compromise. I should have corrected my thinking. I should have made wiser decisions. I should have been more diligent and a better steward of what God had entrusted to me. And instead of nothing to show, I'd have some sort of fruit growing right now on my vine, if not for those little foxes and the normalization of deviance. So when it comes to, you know, like I said earlier, business or family, ministry, our calling, our lives, there's always going to be little foxes running around that need to be caught and need to be dealt with. And if we don't, then, you know, we can let them run around for a little while and we think, oh, it's okay, they're not causing much havoc. But one day, our luck runs out. So if we're going to avoid the normalization of deviance, here's three little foxes that I think we need to catch. So here's the first fox. Now, fox number one is negativity. Negativity. Philippians 4 verse 8. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. I love that verse. But you know, I honestly find that verse so hard in practice, because I don't know if you're anything like me, but you know, my first instinct is to focus on what's not good, to focus on the negative. And you know, you don't need to look very far in this season, at the moment and in this world, to find something negative to focus on. But you know, in my experience, negativity does nothing but rob you and steal from you. And it robs us of our joy, it robs us of our peace, it robs us of our confidence, it robs us of our hope, of our trust, our reliance, and our faith in God. You know, the other day I went to the supermarket. Over here we've got our supermarkets are called Coles and Woolworths. I think you guys have got something like Sainsbury's, is that right? I know they've got one over there on Lord Street, probably not that far from you guys. And yeah, I guess I do what everyone does when you go to the supermarket. You know, you finish your shopping and you look for the shortest queue. You know, I think we all like to think that we're the expert on choosing the checkout lane, the queue that's traveling the fastest. And so I only had a basket of food. I didn't have a big trolley, and so I looked up and down the checkout lanes, and I saw all the way on my left hand side the express lane. And that was free. That didn't have anybody there. So I made a beeline for the express lane, and I kind of made out that I wasn't walking that fast, but I was walking so fast, making sure I was trying to cut off anyone else that got in front of me on that line. And I started, you know, putting my items on the conveyor belt. And as I put my last item down, there was a young guy, and he was you know, working the checkout on this day. And he looks at my items, and then he does this massive sigh and rolls his eyes. So one of these ones is like, oh, like that. So right in front of me. And so obviously, you know, like I was like, what's this guy's problem? And so, you know, as I'm putting my stuff on, and I get up to him, I said, hey mate, you know, what was with the sigh and the eye rolling? And he said, I didn't do that. And I said to him, oh, so when you did this, oh, that's called eye rolling. And so, you know, like I just pressed him a little bit, and I said, mate, what was the problem? And he said, oh, well, you know, this this is the express lane, sir, and you know, it's really meant to be a maximum of 12 items, and you've got 14 items. And you know, like I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it, man. And so I couldn't help myself, guys. Definitely not my finest moment as a pastor, but I put my hand on my chest and I looked at him and I said, mate, I'm so sorry. I've wrecked your life. 14 items instead of 12. Oh, wow. I can see why you gave me the big sigh there. And he was a little bit taken back and he looked at me sideways and things got awkward pretty quickly. So I pushed on, and I should have left it there, but you know, I just said, mate, look, I'm a pastor of a local church here, and you know, it's called Lakeside Church. If you ever need any ministry, you can email me at john.sweeney@lakesidechurch.com. No, I didn't. That last part I kind of made up. I didn't take it that far at all, but I just thought, wow, this kid's attitude, man, that negativity is a fox that is going to slowly kill the vine of culture there at that supermarket. You know, like, it's not going to take very long for that to catch on and for it to seep into, you know, like customers that are coming through. But you know, what a terrible experience. Yeah, but people can be so like that when it comes to life, when it comes to calling. You know, don't be like, you know, the brother that's, you know, just been baptized and he comes and it looks like he's been baptized in lemon juice. You know, walks around with a sour face, and you know, all they can see is the negativity around them. And you know, I just think that it's, you know, in today's day and age, you know, like what we need is we need men of God, you know, who can actually focus on and consider and think about things which are true, you know, consider things which are noble, you know, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there's any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, let's meditate on those things. And you know, so like negativity, it just steals so much, robs us of so much. And so yeah, I just think, you know, one of those foxes that I think can wreak a whole lot of damage is negativity. So let's make sure that we catch that little fox. The second fox that I wanted to talk to you about this morning is distraction. So the first one is negativity, the second one is distraction. 1 Corinthians 7:35 says this, and this I say for your own profit, not that I may put a leash on you, but for what is proper, and that you may serve the Lord without distraction. You know, I think that when it comes to, you know, our calling, that God's plan and God's purpose for our life, serving God, I guess, with all of our heart and all of our soul, we want to make sure that we are serving Him without distraction. Because, you know, for what God's called us to do and to be, it needs our best, our attention. But, you know, one of the biggest enemies to staying attentive is distraction. And this is a little fox, guys, that can do a lot of damage. And if you look at, you know, car wrecks and accidents, yeah, you know, what you'll find is that, you know, drink driving isn't the biggest cause, and neither is falling asleep at the wheel. But the biggest cause for accidents around the world is distraction. I don't know if you've gotten onto Facebook. I'm on Facebook, and there's this little video icon at the bottom of the page, and it's called Facebook Watch. And whatever you do, guys, do not click on that link, because it's this black hole that sucks you in. And, you know, like, you know, I say goodnight to my wife at 9:30, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm still watching these little random, meaningless, but very entertaining Facebook videos. They're the worst. But, you know, distraction gets our focus off the right things and often puts it on all the wrong things. And you think about, you know, the whole downfall of humanity, where you look at Adam and Eve, you know, it all started by getting distracted with a conversation with the devil. The devil just started a conversation, a distraction that really got us so off course, that it introduced sin into humanity and into the world. How did we get there? Through distraction. It's just crazy the impact that it has. So as John had said, I'm originally from New Zealand, and I love being able to go over to visit mum and dad, every year or so, and every couple of years. So my dad lives in this little small town, and I remember, quite a few years ago, I was over there, and we were watching TV, and I was loving it because Dad had bought like the biggest TV, plasma TV back in those days that you'd ever seen. It was gigantic. It was so big, and like I was enjoying it. We were watching the All Blacks play England. Although the last year that didn't go so well for us, but anyway, we'll keep moving on. And back in the days when I was watching this TV, it was so great. And I said to Dad, I was like, Dad, how were you able to afford like this huge TV? Because he works with farmers. He's on a fairly modest wage over there in New Zealand. And he said to me, well, there's a defect on it. I said, listen, that's not a defect. I've been watching this TV the whole week with you. Well, what do you mean there's a defect? And he said, okay, well, you wouldn't know it from where you are, but it's hard to see. But if you come up closer to the TV, there's 3 dead pixels. And I was like, there is not, Dad. And he said, no, sure enough, come up. So I came up to that TV, and there I could see 3 little green dots. 1, 2, 3. Well, I went back to, my seat, and for the rest of that week, watching that TV, and sure enough, this massive TV, all I could see were these 3 tiny little green dots. And that's what happens with distraction. It gets us focused on all the wrong things. It was so distracting. But when it comes to what God, has for us, guys, Jesus gave us everything, his whole life for us, for this call, for this plan, this purpose that he has for our lives. And yet we let ourselves become distracted with things that don't really matter. Often the world will offer us on a silver platter, things that can sometimes even be disguised as good causes. But, is it a God cause? Is it a good cause, or is it a God cause? In other words, is it something, like that could be worthy of our time, or is it something that God has actually specifically called us to do and to be a part of and to be in? And so, I just think one of those little foxes that can spoil the vine is distraction. And the last little fox that I wanted to talk about this morning is complacency. So we've talked about negativity, we've talked about distraction, and the last little fox is complacency. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 15 and 16, it says this: I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will vomit you out of my mouth. There's something about complacency, lukewarmness, apathy, that just grates on us, and it can be so nauseating. Some of us, I think all of us actually have a much bigger problem with apathy than we would even realize. So let me try and sort of illustrate that. So I've got 4 sons. I've been married for 20 years, together with my wife for 23. And for those of you dads who could make a daughter, I was not able to do it. My wife tells me it was my fault, and so for whatever reason we couldn't make that flavour. And and so I would have loved to have a little girl, a daughter, but now what we have to do is we have to wait till one of them finds a beautiful girl to get married to, and I can't wait for that. And so one day, picture this. So one day, my oldest son, who's now 14, I've got 14, 12, 10 and 7. So I'm right in the thick of it, guys. Please keep praying for me. And you know, like, and so I haven't got any daughters. So one of them comes home, my oldest comes home one day, and he says to me, "Oh, Dad, I found a girl that I want to marry." And I am excited, and I'm sure Mum would be excited too, because, you know, maybe we're going to have you know, a daughter in our world now. And so you can imagine how pumped I'd be. And, you know, obviously this must be a girl who he can see himself spending the rest of his life with. So she must be everything that he's hoped and prayed and believed for, because he says, "I want to marry her." And so, you know, we can't wait to hear all about her. And so, you know, so I sit him down and I start asking questions, and, you know, like, what does she do? And how do you know that she's right for you? You know, what's she like, mate? And he kind of responds like this. He responds like this: "No, I don't know. She's okay." I'll be like, wait, didn't you say you've just found a girl that you want to marry? And the first thing that you say about her is that she's okay? He's like, yeah, I haven't really found anyone better. Yeah, she's not all that I was hoping for, but yeah, she's not below average either. You know, I think it might be fine. To which Mum would then say, you know, "So help me, son, I've brought you into this world. I can take you back out of it." But, you know, like, doesn't the thought of your son saying about his future wife, you know, that she's okay, he's kind of just lukewarm about it, doesn't the thought of that make you sick? You know, let alone being the parents of the girl. You know, for all of you guys who have daughters, imagine that your daughter brings home the boy that she wants to marry. Dad, you know, you take him aside to see that he's legit, make sure that he's the real deal, what sort of a man he is. And you say, "Now, how do you feel about my daughter?" And the guy he shrugs his shoulders and he goes, "Oh, she's okay. Not the best girlfriend I've ever had, but not the worst. I'm happy to see where this marriage thing's going to end up." You men would be livid. You would be outraged by such blatant indifference and complacency, and rightly so. And I wonder if God feels the same way about us and the way that we treat this life sometimes. You know, with all that he's given to us, with the price that he has paid for us, and yet we can still live so apathetic, indifferent, and uninterested. You know, I think when it comes to God, there's no room for lukewarm, half-heartedness or partial commitment. I think God wants us to be all in. 1 Samuel 12:24 says this: "Only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all of your heart." Not some of your heart, not half-hearted, not half-baked, but with all of your heart. For consider what great things he has done for you. Luke 10:27. So he answered and said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." Romans 12:11 in the Passion goes this way. It says, "Be enthusiastic to serve the Lord, keeping your passion toward him boiling hot." Boiling hot. Radiate with the glow of the Holy Spirit and let him fill you with excitement as you serve him. And I think that's how God wants us to live this life. And if we're not careful, though, you know, complacency and lukewarmness, it can just come and saturate every part of us. You know, one of the things that I've admired from a distance is how passionate you guys are about football. You know, coming from New Zealand, I am very passionate about rugby union, and I'll be honest with you that this may not be very popular with you guys, but because I was never really brought up with football, with soccer, you know, I don't find the game particularly exciting for me, you know. So I'd much rather watch Jonah Lomu on the wing, you know, running over Mike Catt at fullback or something like that. To me, that's a lot more entertaining. I'm not sure if anyone else can remember those. Remember that. In fact, if you need to take a moment, close your eyes. That was a great day. 1995. Thank you, Jesus. Anyway, I would love one day to get to an English football match, because the atmosphere at those places, it just seems electric. And so, John, were you a Liverpool fan? Was that right? You support Liverpool.
Get behind me, Satan. Now it's Everton. Can't believe you said that, mate.
I remember, mate. I remember. So, but you see, that's the sort of passion that I'm talking about. See that reaction, guys? That's the sort of passion that we want. When it comes to living this life that God's called us to live, you know, for 2020 and the rest of the year, you know, there's still so much that God wants to show us, you know, to take us places that we've never been before, to do things in us that have never been done before. You know, to work miracles and to bring hope to, you know, a broken world. And behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall come to pass, Isaiah 43 verse 19. And those are the sorts of things that I think should stir us up and, you know, should stoke up our passion. Because, you know, like the world that we're living in at the moment, I think you guys are probably still on lockdown in a certain way. In many ways, we still are over here in Australia as well. You know, for so many of us, you know, like 2020 has taken us by surprise. But I'll tell you right now, let me remind you about something. It didn't take God by surprise. You know, like it doesn't mean that God's any less effective or any less willing to want to work in our world and in our families and in our workplaces and in our homes, you know, and now's not the time for us to be sinking back, you know, into this lukewarm, comfortable, apathetic, you know, like stasis state of just, you know, like doing nothing. But you know, like even more so in this season, we should be passionately serving God. We should be passionately pursuing Him, you know, with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our mind, with all of our strength. But again, if we let lukewarm and complacency, if we let that soak into our lives, it is a little fox that will do a lot of damage. And one day we'll wake up when we're chasing all of those things that the world's asking us to chase, you know, a better job, more money, bigger bank balance, a nicer home, a better car, you know, all of these things that the world would throw at us and say, no, you should be chasing these things. And we wonder why we might have some of those things, but feel so, feel like we just haven't made it when it comes to God's calling and God's plan and God's purpose for our lives. You know, I would much rather have less in my life materially, but have everything that God wanted me to be and to have done everything that God wanted me to do. And so one day you'll wake up, you know, with the bigger house, maybe with the better job, you know, with more money in the bank balance. And we're kind of like, huh? Is this it? Is this really what I should have been pursuing? So let's wake up and let's make sure that, you know, we are not letting the normalization of deviance to affect our lives, but rather let's catch those little foxes before they spoil the vine. And I think then we'll be able to step into all of the amazing fruit that God has for us. God bless you, Lakeside. Thank you so much for having me. And that was my word for this morning.